It was one of those cold November evenings when the rain just wouldn't stop. The kind of night where people rush home as fast as they can, pulling their coats tight around them. Robert was wiping down tables at Tony's Italian Kitchen, a small restaurant in the heart of the city. He'd been working there for 3 years now, always the evening shift, always with a smile on his face even when his feet ached. Around 8 o'clock, something caught his eye through the big front window. 2 small faces were pressed against the glass, their breath making little fog circles. A girl and a younger boy, both soaking wet from head to toe. Their clothes looked old and too thin for this kind of weather. The little boy was shivering so hard his whole body was shaking. Robert stopped what he was doing. His manager, Mr. Tony, was strict about one thing: no beggars near the restaurant. He'd said it 100 times. It's bad for business, he'd always say. But Robert couldn't just look away. These weren't adults asking for money. These were children, and they looked scared. He glanced toward the kitchen. Mr. Tony was busy yelling at the cook about something. Without thinking too much about it, Robert grabbed 2 white plates from the stack. He filled them with hot spaghetti and meatballs, the steam rising up in the air. He wrapped everything carefully in aluminum foil to keep it warm. The other waiters watched him as he headed toward the door. "You're gonna get in trouble," one of them whispered. Robert just shrugged. Some things were more important than keeping a job. When he stepped outside, the cold rain hit him immediately. The 2 children backed away a little, like they thought they were in trouble. "Hey, it's okay," Robert said softly, kneeling down to their level. "I brought you some food. You must be freezing out here." The girl looked at him with wide eyes. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Her brown hair was stuck to her face, and her lips had a slight blue tint from the cold. The boy hiding behind her was maybe 7. He peeked out from behind his sister with the saddest eyes Robert had ever seen. "Is this really for us?" the girl asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course it is," Robert smiled. "Come here under the awning. At least you'll be out of the rain while you eat." The children didn't need to be told twice. They sat down right there on the cold concrete and opened those foil packets like it was Christmas morning. The way they ate broke Robert's heart. They weren't just hungry, they were starving. The little boy stuffed the spaghetti into his mouth so fast he started coughing. "Slow down, buddy," Robert said gently. "The food's not going anywhere. Take your time." The girl put her hand on her brother's back. "Listen to the nice man, Danny. Eat slowly or you'll get sick." Robert sat down next to them, not caring that the ground was wet and dirty. "What are you 2 doing out here in this weather? Where are your parents?" The girl's face changed. The hungry excitement disappeared, replaced by something much sadder. She looked down at her plate and didn't say anything for a long moment. Finally, she spoke so quietly Robert almost couldn't hear her. "It's just us now. Our mom and dad, they're not here anymore." Robert felt his chest tighten. He'd seen a lot of tough situations working in this neighborhood, but something about these 2 kids got to him in a way nothing else had. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "I'm Lily," the girl said. "This is my little brother Danny. Well, Lily and Danny, I'm Robert. And I want you to know something. Whenever you're hungry, you come find me here, okay? I work every evening. I'll make sure you get something to eat." Lily looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Really, you mean it?" "I mean it," Robert said. And he did. He had no idea how he'd manage it with Mr. Tony breathing down his neck. But he'd figure something out. The door to the restaurant swung open, and Robert's heart sank. Mr. Tony stood there with his arms crossed, his face red with anger. "Robert, what do you think you're doing?" "Get back to work, now." Robert stood up slowly. "I'm coming, sir. Just give me 1 minute." "No minutes. We have customers waiting." Robert turned back to the children. "You 2 finish eating. Take your time. And remember what I said, okay?" As he walked back inside, Mr. Tony grabbed his arm. "I told you about this. No handouts. Next time you're fired. You understand me?" "Yes, sir," Robert said quietly. But in his mind, he was already planning how to help these kids again tomorrow. Through the window, he watched Lily and Danny finish their meal. The little boy was smiling now, really smiling. His sister kept one arm around him, protecting him from the cold wind. When they were done, Lily carefully folded the aluminum foil and put it in her pocket. Then she looked back at the restaurant, found Robert through the window, and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Robert nodded at her. His shift wouldn't end for another 3 hours, but already he was thinking about what leftovers he could save for them, maybe some bread rolls. Maybe some soup if there was any left. The other waiters shook their heads at him. "You're too soft," one of them said. "You can't save every kid on the street." But Robert wasn't trying to save every kid. Just these two. Because something told him that this wasn't a random moment. This was the beginning of something important. He couldn't explain it. He just knew. That night, long after his shift ended, Robert walked through the alley behind the restaurant. He'd brought some extra bread wrapped in a clean kitchen towel. He found Lily and Danny huddled together in the doorway, trying to stay out of the wind. "I thought you might still be hungry," he said, handing them the bread. Lily's eyes filled with tears again. "Why are you being so nice to us?" "Nobody's been nice to us in a really long time." Robert crouched down and looked at both of them. "Because everybody needs somebody to care about them. And right now, I'm somebody who cares about you too. Simple as that." He didn't know it then, but that rainy November night was about to change 3 lives forever. Sometimes the biggest journeys start with the smallest acts of kindness, and sometimes a simple plate of spaghetti can change everything. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that Robert never planned but couldn't stop. Every single evening, like clockwork, Lily and Danny would show up in the alley behind Tony's Italian kitchen. Sometimes they'd arrive early, sitting on old milk crates and doing homework by the light of a street lamp. Other times they'd come later, waiting patiently near the back door until Robert's shift ended. Robert started packing extra food every night. Not just leftovers anymore. He'd make fresh plates when the cook wasn't looking, hiding them under dish towels. Spaghetti, chicken parmesan, even pizza when they had it. His paycheck was only about $300 a week after taxes, and his rent alone took most of that. But somehow, Robert always found a way. "You're gonna get caught," his coworker Steve warned him one night. "Mr. Tony's not stupid. He's gonna notice food going missing." "Let him notice," Robert said, though his stomach twisted with worry. He needed this job. His own apartment was barely more than a room with a bathroom, but it was all he could afford. Still, every time he saw those kids' faces light up when he brought them dinner, nothing else mattered. Through their nightly conversations, Robert learned their story piece by piece. Lily was 11, Danny was 7. Their parents had died in a terrible car accident about 8 months ago. A drunk driver ran a red light. Just like that, everything changed. They had no other family, no grandparents or aunts or uncles who could take them in. The state had placed them in a foster home across town. But the foster parents, according to Lily, didn't really care about them. They just wanted the monthly check from the government. There were 6 other kids in that house and never enough food to go around. The foster dad yelled all the time. The foster mom ignored them completely. "So we left," Lily told Robert one evening, her voice matter-of-fact, like she was talking about changing schools instead of running away. "We've been staying wherever we can find a safe spot. Sometimes the library during the day, sometimes the bus station when it's really cold, and now, here." Robert felt something break inside his chest. These weren't bad kids. They weren't troublemakers. They were just 2 children trying to survive in a world that had forgotten about them. He started bringing more than just food. One cold night, he showed up with 2 thick blankets he'd bought from the thrift store down the street. They cost him $15 he'd saved from tips, money he'd planned to use for his electric bill. He'd figure that out later. "These are for you," he said, handing them over. "It's getting colder. You need to stay warm." Danny hugged the blanket like it was the greatest gift in the world. "It's so soft," he whispered. The boy didn't talk much, but when he did, it always made Robert smile. Another time, Robert noticed Lily's shoes had holes in them. The next day, he brought a pair of sneakers from the donation bin at his church. They were a little big, but Lily stuffed newspaper in the toes and wore them anyway. "They're perfect," she said, and Robert knew she was lying to make him feel good. He bought Danny a warm jacket when he saw the boy shivering so hard his teeth chattered. He brought them soap and toothbrushes. He even gave Lily a flashlight so they could see better at night. Each item was small, inexpensive, nothing fancy. But to these kids, they were treasures. The problem was Mr. Tony was starting to notice. The restaurant owner wasn't blind and food costs were adding up. One evening, he pulled Robert aside in the kitchen. "We need to talk," Mr. Tony said, his arms crossed over his large belly. "I've been doing inventory. Food's going missing. A lot of food. You know anything about that?" Robert's heart pounded. He'd rehearsed this conversation in his head a dozen times, but now that it was happening, his mouth went dry. "Sir, I can explain." You're feeding those street kids, aren't you? Mr. Tony's face was red. I warned you. I specifically told you not to encourage them. Do you know what this could do to my business? What if customers see homeless kids hanging around? What if the health inspector shows up? They're not homeless by choice, Robert said quietly. They're orphans. They have nowhere to go. That's not my problem. And it's not your problem either. Call social services if you're so worried about them. They ran away from social services. The foster home was treating them badly. Mr. Tony threw his hands up. So what do you want me to do? Turn my restaurant into a charity? I got bills to pay, Robert. I got suppliers breathing down my neck. I can't afford to lose food like this. Take it out of my paycheck, Robert heard himself say. Whatever the food costs, just subtract it from what you pay me. Mr. Tony stared at him like he'd lost his mind. You make $8 an hour. You really want to work here for free? If that's what it takes. The restaurant owner shook his head slowly. You're either the kindest person I ever met or the biggest fool. Maybe both, he sighed deeply. Fine, but this is your last warning. If this causes any problems, if customers complain, if anything goes wrong, you're done. Understand? Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. That night, Robert's check was $37 lighter. It meant he'd have to skip buying groceries for himself this week. Pasta and butter would have to do. Maybe some eggs if he had enough left over. But when he saw Lily and Danny's faces as he brought them dinner, he knew he'd made the right choice. Robert? Lily asked one evening as they sat together in the alley. Why do you do this for us? You don't even know us. Robert thought about it for a moment. How could he explain that some things in life just felt right, even when they made no logical sense? When I was younger, he finally said, I went through some hard times too. Different from yours, but hard in their own way. And someone helped me when they didn't have to. I guess I'm just passing that kindness forward. Were you alone too? Danny asked, speaking up in his small voice. Sometimes, Robert admitted, but not anymore. And you two aren't alone either. You've got each other, and now you've got me. Lily wiped her eyes. We'll pay you back someday. I promise. When we're older and we have jobs, we'll pay you back for everything. Robert laughed softly. I'm not keeping a tab, kiddo. That's not how kindness works. You don't do nice things because you expect something back. You do them because they're the right thing to do. But Lily shook her head firmly. No, we're going to remember this. Every single thing you've done for us. And someday we're going to make it right. Robert didn't argue. If holding on to that promise helped her get through the rough days ahead, then so be it. He had no way of knowing that 22 years later, she'd make good on those words in a way he could never imagine. For now, though, all that mattered was getting through each day. Making sure these two kids had food in their bellies and a friendly face to count on. It wasn't much. But sometimes not much is everything. December came with bitter cold that seemed to cut right through your clothes. Robert started his shift one evening like always, but something felt wrong from the moment he walked in. Maybe it was the way the wind howled outside, or maybe it was just a feeling in his gut. Either way, he couldn't shake it. Around 9 o'clock, he headed out to the alley with the usual food. But Lily and Danny weren't at their normal spot. Robert called out softly, Lily? Danny, you guys here? Nothing. Just the sound of trash cans rattling in the wind. He walked further into the alley, past the dumpster, around the corner where they sometimes hid when it rained. That's when he heard it. Crying. Not just any crying, but the kind that comes from deep inside when you can't hold it in anymore. He found them huddled together behind some old crates. Lily's face was red and streaked with tears. Danny was curled up in her lap, shaking, but not from the cold. He looked sick. Really sick. Robert rushed over and knelt beside them. What's wrong?
What happened?
Lily couldn't even speak at first. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Finally, she choked out the words. They found us. The people from social services. They're making us go back. When? Robert asked, already feeling his heart sink. Tomorrow morning. They're sending Danny to a home in the north part of the state. They're sending me somewhere completely different, 3 hours away. Her voice cracked. They're separating us, Robert. We've never been apart, not once. He's my little brother. I'm supposed to take care of him. Robert looked at Danny. The boy's forehead was burning hot when he touched it. How long has he been like this? Since yesterday. He's been coughing real bad. I tried to keep him warm, but... Lily broke down again, unable to finish. This boy needed a doctor, medicine, a warm bed. Not another night in a cold alley, and definitely not a long drive to a strange new place tomorrow. Robert sat back against the brick wall, his mind racing. What could he do? He was nobody, just a waiter making barely enough to survive. He had no power, no connections, no money, and yet looking at these two kids, he knew he couldn't just let this happen. Stay here, he told them. I'll be right back. He went back into the restaurant and pulled out his phone. There was a woman named Patricia, who volunteered at the community center where Robert sometimes helped out on weekends. She worked with foster kids and knew the system inside and out. He'd gotten her number months ago, never thinking he'd actually need it. She answered on the third ring. Hello? Patricia, it's Robert. From the community center. I need help. It's urgent, he explained everything. The kids, the situation, the fact that Danny was sick and they were about to be separated. Patricia listened quietly, asking questions here and there. Finally, she said, Robert, if you really want to help these kids, there's only one way. You'd have to become their foster parent. The words hung in the air like a punch to the stomach. Me, I can barely afford to feed myself. I know. But the state provides some financial support for foster parents. Not much, but something. The real question is, are you willing to do this? Because it's not easy. It's paperwork and background checks and home visits and a million other things. And even then, there's no guarantee they'll approve you. Robert looked through the restaurant window toward the alley where Lily and Danny waited, two kids who'd already lost everything, who'd been kicked around by a system that was supposed to protect them, who trusted him, maybe the only adult who'd shown them real kindness in months. What do I need to do? He asked. The next few weeks were like nothing Robert had ever experienced. Patricia walked him through every step, but it felt like climbing a mountain with no equipment. First came the background check, then the home inspection, which was embarrassing because his apartment was so small and run down. Then came the interviews, where people in suits asked him 1,000 questions about why he wanted to do this. Mr. Chen, one social worker said, looking at his financial records, you make $1,200 a month. Your rent is $700. That leaves very little for 3 people to live on. I'll get another job, Robert said. I'll work extra shifts. I'll do whatever it takes. That's admirable, but these children need stability. They need someone who can provide for them properly. They need someone who actually cares about them. Robert surprised himself with how loud his voice got. Sorry, I'm sorry. But these kids have been through hell. They've been treated like burdens, like problems to solve. I'm offering them a home. A real home, where they'll be safe and loved. Isn't that worth something? The social worker's expression softened just a little. It is, but we have to consider every factor. In the meantime, Robert was allowed supervised visits with Lily and Danny at the community center. They'd put the kids in temporary emergency housing while everything got sorted out. At least they were together for now, and Danny was getting the medicine he needed. Are you really going to be our foster dad? Danny asked during one visit, his eyes wide with hope. I'm trying my best, buddy, but I need you to be patient, okay? These things take time. Lily squeezed his hand. We'll wait, as long as it takes. We trust you. Robert's own family thought he'd lost his mind. His mother called from back home, worried. Robert, you can barely take care of yourself. How are you going to raise 2 children? I don't know, Mom, but I have to try. What if they're trouble? What if they have problems? They're not trouble. They're just kids who need help. His friends from work were no better. Dude, you're throwing your life away, Steve told him. You're 28 years old. You should be out having fun, meeting someone, building your own life, not taking on somebody else's kids, but Robert didn't see it that way. This wasn't throwing his life away. This was maybe the first time his life had real meaning. Finally, after 6 weeks that felt like 6 years, Patricia called him. Robert, can you sit down for this? His heart hammered in his chest. Just tell me. They approved you. Lily and Danny can come home with you next week. You're officially their foster parent. Robert actually had to hold on to the kitchen counter to keep from falling down. Are you serious? They said yes. They said yes. Against some people's better judgment, I might add. But you convinced them, Robert. Your sincerity came through. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Promise me you'll ask for help when you need it. You can't do this alone. Nobody can. I promise. When he told Lily and Danny the news, Lily burst into tears and hugged him so tight he could barely breathe. Danny wrapped his arms around both of them, his face buried in Robert's shirt. Thank you. Lily whispered. "Thank you for not giving up on us." Robert's own eyes burned with tears. "I could never give up on you two. Never." That weekend, he moved his tiny couch out of his bedroom and set up 2 small beds from Goodwill. It was cramped. The 3 of them could barely turn around without bumping into each other. But it was warm. It was safe. And most importantly, it was filled with love. On the day they moved in, Danny stood in the middle of the room, looking around with wonder. "Is this really ours? We get to stay here?" "This is really yours," Robert confirmed. "For as long as you need it." Lily helped Danny unpack the few belongings they had in a plastic bag. As Robert watched them settle in, he felt a strange mix of terror and joy. He had no idea how he was going to make this work. He'd have to stretch every dollar, work longer hours, give up any personal life he might have had. But looking at their faces, seeing them smile for real for the first time in who knows how long, he knew one thing for certain. This was the best decision he'd ever made in his life. The first year was the hardest. Robert quickly learned that taking care of 2 children was 10 times more difficult than he'd imagined, even with the small monthly support check from the state. It covered maybe half of what they actually needed, and that was if he stretched every penny until it screamed. He kept his job at Tony's Italian Kitchen but added a second job as a night janitor at an office building downtown. His new schedule was brutal. He'd work at the restaurant from 10 in the morning until 7 at night. Then he'd rush home, make sure Lily and Danny had dinner and did their homework, and head out again at 10 to clean offices until 3 in the morning. 4 hours of sleep if he was lucky, then up again to get the kids ready for school. The apartment stayed exactly as cramped as that first day. Robert gave the kids the only bedroom, such as it was. He slept on a pull-out couch in the living room that also served as the dining room and study area. When he lay down at night, he could hear Danny's wheezing from his asthma through the thin wall. Every cough felt like a knife in his chest, especially when he didn't have money for the medication the boy needed. Money was always the problem. New shoes for Lily when she outgrew hers, $40 he didn't have. Danny's asthma inhaler, $65 with the discount pharmacy card. School supplies at the beginning of each year, another $100 somehow. Winter coats, toothpaste, shampoo. The bills never stopped coming, and Robert's paycheck never seemed to be enough. He learned to cook in bulk. Rice and beans became their best friend. Chicken when it was on sale. Pasta at least 4 times a week. Fresh fruit was a luxury they had maybe once a month. Robert would pack the same peanut butter sandwich for his own lunch every single day for 3 years straight. The kids never knew that sometimes he skipped eating entirely so there'd be enough for them. "Why don't you eat with us?" Danny asked one evening, watching Robert put food on their plates but none on his own. "I ate at work," Robert lied with a smile. "Mr. Tony lets me have the leftovers." "I'm stuffed, buddy. You eat up." The truth was, there were no leftovers. Robert had stopped eating at the restaurant to save money. His pants hung loose on his waist and his shirt seemed bigger every month. But as long as Lily and Danny were healthy and fed, nothing else mattered. Despite everything, Robert never missed a single important moment in their lives. When Lily had a piano recital at school, he showed up in his waiter's uniform smelling like garlic and tomato sauce because he'd come straight from his shift. He sat in the back of the auditorium and clapped louder than anyone when she played her piece, even though his eyes were heavy from lack of sleep. When Danny made the soccer team in 5th grade, Robert was there for every game, even the ones that started at 9 in the morning on Saturday, when he'd only gotten home from his janitor job 5 hours earlier. He'd cheer from the sidelines, video camera in hand, recording every kick and goal like Danny was playing in the World Cup, parent-teacher conferences, school plays, science fairs, basketball games, art shows. Robert was there for all of it, often the only parent who showed up alone, often exhausted beyond measure, but always present. The other parents would chat about their vacations and new cars while Robert stood quietly to the side in his second-hand clothes, but he never felt ashamed. He was there. That's what counted. The kids noticed his sacrifices even when he tried to hide them. Lily started finding him asleep at the kitchen table sometimes, his head down on homework he'd been trying to help her with before exhaustion took over. She'd see the calculator next to a stack of bills, numbers crossed out and recalculated over and over, trying to make the money stretch just a little further. One winter, when Lily was 14, She overheard Robert on the phone with the electric company, begging them not to shut off their power. He promised to pay half now and half in 2 weeks. She heard the shake in his voice, the desperation. After he hung up, she found him sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. "Robert?" she said softly. He looked up quickly, wiping his eyes and forcing a smile. "Hey, kiddo. Everything okay?" "I should be asking you that. I'm fine. Just tired. How's your homework coming?" But Lily didn't move. "I could get a job. I'm old enough now. I could work at the grocery store or something, help with the bills." "Absolutely not," Robert said firmly. "Your job is to go to school and get good grades. That's it. I'm handling the money stuff." "But you're killing yourself. You work all the time. You never sleep. You barely eat. This isn't fair to you." Robert stood up and put his hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me. What's not fair is what happened to you and your brother. Losing your parents, bouncing through foster care, being treated like you didn't matter. That was unfair. This, me working hard to give you a good life. That's just what family does. And like it or not, we're family now." Tears rolled down Lily's face. "We don't deserve you. Yes, you do. Every kid deserves someone who'll fight for them. You two just happened to be lucky enough to get me," he said with a tired grin. Danny struggled with school more than his sister did. His asthma kept him out sick a lot, and he'd missed so much schooling before Robert took them in that he was always behind. Robert would stay up late, helping him with math problems even though Robert himself barely remembered algebra. They'd work together at the kitchen table, Danny frustrated and ready to give up. Robert patient and encouraging. "I'm too stupid for this," Danny would say, throwing his pencil down. "Hey, don't talk like that. You're not stupid. Your brain just works differently, that's all. We'll figure it out together." And they always did somehow, even if it took until midnight. Even if Robert had to be up for work in 4 hours. The years rolled by like this. No vacations. No trips to the movies. No fancy birthday parties. When Danny turned 12, his party was a homemade cake and 3 friends from school eating pizza in their tiny living room. When Lily turned 16, Robert scraped together enough money for a small cake and a used book she'd been wanting. But there were good moments too. Movie nights where they'd watch old DVDs from the library. Game nights where they'd play cards or board games Robert found at garage sales. Sunday mornings when Robert had a few hours off and they'd make pancakes together, laughing and making a mess of the kitchen. "You know what?" Danny said one Sunday morning, syrup all over his face. "We might not have a lot of stuff, but I'm happy here." "I know that's weird to say, but I am." Robert felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's not weird at all, buddy. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Lily smiled from across the table. "Me too, this is home. A real home." Through all the struggle, through all the nights Robert lay awake worrying about money, through all the times he felt like he was drowning and might not make it to the surface, moments like these made everything worthwhile. He watched them grow. Lily became confident and smart, bringing home honor roll certificates that Robert hung on the refrigerator like they were gold medals. Danny became kind and funny, always making people laugh despite his own struggles. They were good kids. Better than good. They were amazing and they were his. Not by blood, but by choice, by love. By showing up every single day even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard, Robert never complained. Not once. Not when his back ached from mopping floors. Not when his hands cramped from carrying heavy trays. Not when he was so tired he could barely see straight. The kids never heard him say, "I wish I hadn't done this," or "This is too hard," or "I made a mistake," because he didn't feel that way. Not for a second. Taking in Lily and Danny was the best thing he'd ever done with his life. They'd saved him just as much as he'd saved them. As Lily and Danny got older, they began to truly understand the weight of what Robert had sacrificed for them. It wasn't just that he worked hard. Lots of parents worked hard. It was the depth of it, the completeness of his sacrifice. He'd given up everything, every dream, every comfort, every piece of his own future, to give them a chance at a better life. The realization hit Lily hardest one evening when she was 16. She'd stayed up late finishing a paper for English class and came out to the kitchen for water. That's when she found Robert at the table, sound asleep, his head resting on his arms. Next to him was a pile of bills and his worn calculator. She looked closer and saw what he'd been working on. The electric bill was due. So was rent. And Danny needed new shoes because his old ones were literally falling apart. Robert had been doing math. trying to figure out how to pay for everything with money that simply wasn't there. Lily noticed Robert's dinner plate in the sink. It had nothing on it but a tiny portion of plain rice. That's all he'd eaten, while she and Danny had chicken and vegetables. She thought back over the past months and realized this wasn't new. Robert always served himself last and always took the smallest portion. He claimed he wasn't hungry or had eaten at work, but now she saw the truth. He was starving himself so they could eat. She looked at his hands, resting on the table. They were rough and scarred from years of restaurant work and janitorial duties. His fingers had burns and cuts that never seemed to fully heal. The skin was red and dry from constant exposure to cleaning chemicals. These were the hands of a man who'd worked himself to the bone for 2 kids who weren't even his own. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she grabbed a blanket and gently draped it over Robert's shoulders. He stirred slightly but didn't wake. She stood there for a long moment watching him sleep, and made a decision that would drive her for the next decade of her life. The next morning, she pulled Danny aside while Robert was in the shower getting ready for work. "We need to talk," she said seriously. Danny, now 13, looked worried. "What's wrong? Is Robert okay?" "No, he's not okay." "Look around, Danny, really look. He's working himself to death for us. He barely eats. He never sleeps. He doesn't own a single thing for himself. Everything goes to us." "I know," Danny said quietly. "I see it too. We have to do something about it. Not now, but someday. We have to pay him back for everything he's done." "How?" "We're just kids," Lily's jaw set with determination. "We won't be kids forever. Listen to me. We're going to work harder than anyone else. We're going to get the best grades possible. We're going to earn scholarships and go to good colleges. And then we're going to build something amazing. Something that will let us take care of Robert the way he's taken care of us." Danny nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You mean it? We're really going to do that?" "I promise you. I don't know how long it'll take or exactly how we'll do it, but we're going to make Robert's life easy. We're going to give him everything he never gave himself because he was too busy giving to us." They shook on it. A solemn pact between siblings who'd already lost one family and refused to fail the person who'd given them a second chance. From that day forward, everything changed in how Lily and Danny approached life. Lily, who'd always been a good student, became an exceptional one. She stayed up late studying, joined every academic club, volunteered for extra credit projects. She wasn't trying to be the best just for herself. She was trying to be the best for Robert. When her guidance counselor called her in junior year to discuss college options, Lily had one goal in mind: full scholarship. She couldn't let Robert pay for her education. He'd already given too much. "You're looking at some excellent schools," the counselor said, looking at Lily's grades and test scores. "Stanford, MIT, Berkeley. You could get into any of them. Which ones have the best financial aid?" Lily asked. "Well, all of them have good programs, but what's your family's financial situation?" "We have no money," Lily said bluntly. "So I need a full ride." "Complete scholarship." "That's non-negotiable." She applied to 15 schools and wrote her college essay about Robert, about a waiter who saved 2 orphaned kids because it was the right thing to do, about sacrifice and love and family that's chosen, not given. 3 teachers cried when they read it. So did the college admissions officers, apparently, because Lily got accepted to Stanford with a full scholarship that covered everything: tuition, room, board, and even books. When she told Robert, he actually sat down hard in his chair like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. "Stanford? You got into Stanford?" "Full scholarship," Lily said, trying not to cry. "It won't cost you anything." "Not a single penny." Robert pulled her into a hug and wept. Not just a few tears, but real sobbing. "I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud." "I learned from the best," Lily whispered back. Danny followed his sister's lead. He worked twice as hard to overcome his learning challenges. When other kids were playing video games or hanging out at the mall, Danny was studying. Robert would find him at the kitchen table at midnight, still working through math problems, refusing to give up. "You should get some sleep." "Fuddy," Robert would say. "Not until I get this right," Danny would reply with determination. Danny discovered he had a gift for understanding how things worked, how systems fit together. While his sister excelled at abstract thinking and computer science, Danny was brilliant with anything mechanical or physical. He took apart old electronics just to see how they functioned, then put them back together. He built robots from scrap parts for the science fair. His physics teacher called him a natural engineer. By his senior year, Danny had also earned a full scholarship, this time to MIT for engineering. When he told Robert, he added, "This is because of you. Everything good in my life is because of you." Robert shook his head. "No, this is all you. Your hard work, your dedication. You gave us the chance to work hard," Danny said. "Without you, we'd have nothing. We'd be nothing." The day Lily graduated from high school, Robert took the afternoon off from both jobs for the first time in years. He sat in the auditorium in his nicest clothes, which were still pretty worn out, and watched her walk across the stage as valedictorian. When she gave her speech and thanked the man who saved my life and showed me what real love looks like, Robert had to cover his face because he was crying too hard. After the ceremony, an elderly woman approached him. "Are you Lily's father?" "Foster father," Robert corrected automatically. "Well, foster or not, you should be very proud. That girl is something special." "She is," Robert agreed. "But so is her brother. They're both amazing. You must have done something right to raise two children like that on your own." Robert thought about all the missed meals, the sleepless nights, the constant worry and struggle. "I just loved them. That's all. Just loved them and tried my best." "That's more than most people do," the woman said kindly. 3 years later, Danny graduated high school with similar honors. By then, Lily was already at Stanford studying computer science and doing incredibly well. She called home every week, always asking about Robert's health, if he was eating enough, if he needed anything. "I'm fine," Robert would always say, which was partially true. He was still working both jobs, still struggling to make ends meet. But now it was just him, which made things a little easier. The apartment felt empty without the kids. Too quiet. Robert would come home after his shifts and half expect to see Danny doing homework at the kitchen table, or Lily cooking dinner. But they were gone, off building their futures. Exactly as it should be. Exactly as he'd hoped. Still, he missed them terribly. On the night before Danny left for MIT, the three of them sat together in that tiny living room one last time. They ordered pizza, a rare treat, and talked about old memories. "Remember when we burned the pancakes so bad the smoke alarm went off? Remember that winter when the heat broke and we all slept in the living room to stay warm? Remember movie nights and board games and all those little moments that had made up their life together?" "I want to make a promise," Lily said seriously, looking at Robert. "Both of us do." "You don't need to promise me anything," Robert started, but Danny interrupted. "Yes, we do. We need you to know. Everything you've done for us, every sacrifice you made, we saw it. All of it. And we're going to pay you back." "That's not necessary, I told you." "Let us finish," Lily said. "We're going to be successful. We're going to build something amazing. And when we do, we're going to take care of you the way you took care of us. You'll never have to work again. You'll have everything you ever wanted. That's our promise to you." Robert smiled, thinking they were just being young and optimistic. "I appreciate that. But you know what I want? I want you two to be happy. Build good lives for yourselves. That's all the payback I need. We'll be happy," Danny said, "but you're going to be taken care of too. Just wait and see." Robert hugged them both, never imagining that 22 years later they'd actually do it. College was just the beginning for Lily and Danny. They attacked their education with the same fierce determination that had gotten them there in the first place. While other students partied and enjoyed their freedom, Lily and Danny studied like their lives depended on it. In a way, they did. Every late night in the library, every difficult exam, every project was another step toward keeping their promise to Robert. Lily thrived at Stanford. She wasn't just good at computer science, she was exceptional. Her professors noticed immediately that she had something special, a way of seeing patterns and solutions that most students didn't possess. By her sophomore year, she was already working on projects that graduate students struggled with. By her junior year, companies were trying to recruit her before she even graduated. Meanwhile, Danny was making waves at MIT. His gift for understanding mechanical systems translated perfectly into robotics and engineering. He could look at a complex machine and instantly see how to make it better, more efficient, more innovative. His thesis project caught the attention of several major tech companies, all offering him positions with impressive salaries right out of school. They both graduated with highest honors. Lily had job offers from 5 different Silicon Valley companies. Danny had offers from 3 major robotics firms and 2 aerospace companies. The money being offered was more than either of them had ever dreamed of. 6-figure salaries, signing bonuses, stock options, but neither of them forgot what they were working toward. Lily took a position at a promising tech startup in Silicon Valley. The pay was good, but more importantly, she'd learn how startups worked from the inside. Danny went to work for a major robotics company in Boston. His salary was enough to live comfortably and save aggressively. Every month, both of them sent money to Robert. Not a lot at first, just a few $100s each. For groceries, Lily would say. For whatever you need, Danny would add. Robert protested every time, saying they needed to save their money, build their own lives. But they wouldn't listen. You sent us to college, Lily told him over the phone. You raised us. This is nothing compared to what you gave us. Please just take it. Finally, Robert stopped arguing. The truth was the extra money helped. He was 52 years old now, and his body was breaking down from decades of hard physical labor. His back hurt constantly. His hands had arthritis. The doctor told him he needed to cut back on work, but how could he? He still had bills to pay. The kids' money meant he could finally reduce his hours at the janitor job. He could work just 1 job instead of 2. He could sleep more than 4 hours a night. It felt like a luxury he hadn't experienced in 20 years. But Lily and Danny weren't satisfied. They'd call each other almost every night discussing their plans. They'd both learned a lot working for other people, but they knew that building something of their own was the only way to really achieve what they wanted. I think I'm ready, Lily said during one call, 3 years after graduation. I know software inside and out now. I've seen what works and what doesn't. I have ideas. Same here, Danny replied. I've been working on some robotics concepts that I think could change manufacturing. But I'd need your software expertise to make it work. What if we combined them? Lily asked, her mind already racing. What if we built an AI system that could control and optimize robotic manufacturing? Something that learns and improves over time? That's brilliant. That could revolutionize entire industries. They met in person a month later, pooling their savings and sketching out business plans on napkins in a coffee shop, just like the famous startup stories they'd read about. Between them, they had about $200,000 saved, every penny they hadn't needed for basic living expenses over the past 3 years. It wasn't much to start a tech company, but it was a start. They called their company Synergy Tech. The name represented the synergy between artificial intelligence and robotics, between software and hardware, between a sister and brother who'd survived impossible odds together. The first year was brutal. They worked out of a tiny rented office space that cost them $3,000 a month. They hired 2 other engineers they'd gone to school with, paying them with promises of equity and future success. Lily handled all the software development, while Danny built the physical prototypes. They survived on ramen noodles and coffee, pulling 100-hour weeks, sleeping on couches in the office. Several times they nearly ran out of money. Several times they wondered if they'd made a terrible mistake quitting their stable, high-paying jobs. But they pushed forward, driven by their vision and their promise to Robert. Robert didn't know the full extent of what they were doing. They told him they'd started a small business, but downplayed how risky it was. They didn't want him to worry. They kept sending him money every month, even when their own bank accounts were dangerously low. The breakthrough came in their second year. A mid-sized manufacturing company agreed to test their system in one of their factories. The results were incredible. Their AI-powered robotics reduced production errors by 47% and increased efficiency by 62%. Word spread quickly through the industry. Suddenly, companies were calling them. Big companies. Companies with serious money to spend. Synergy Tech went from struggling to pay rent to signing contracts worth millions of dollars. By year 3, they'd raised their first round of venture capital funding. $10 million from investors who believed in their vision. Lily and Danny hired more staff, moved into a real office building, and started scaling up production. The money was really rolling in now, but they lived modestly, remembering what Robert had taught them about humility and hard work. By year 4, their company was valued at $200 million. They'd expanded to 3 offices and employed over 100 people. Major manufacturers across the country were implementing their systems. The technology press wrote articles about them, calling them the brilliant sibling duo revolutionizing manufacturing. Every success, Every milestone, every achievement felt hollow to Lily and Danny if they couldn't share it with Robert. They'd video call him after closing major deals, wanting him to be part of the celebration even if he didn't fully understand the technical details. "You two have done so well," Robert would say, his voice filled with pride. "I always knew you were special." "We learned it from you," Lily would always reply, but they still hadn't achieved their ultimate goal. Robert was still working at Tony's Italian kitchen. He'd finally quit the janitor job, thank goodness, but at 61 years old he was still on his feet every day, serving tables, dealing with difficult customers, coming home exhausted. His apartment was still the same tiny, run-down place he'd lived in for decades. This wasn't acceptable to Lily and Danny. Not anymore. In the 5th year, they took Synergy Tech public. The company's initial public offering was massively successful. Overnight, their personal net worth jumped into the hundreds of millions. The siblings who'd once slept in alleys and counted pennies for school supplies were now multimillionaires. But money meant nothing to them except as a tool to finally take care of the man who'd sacrificed everything for them. "It's time," Lily told Danny after the IPO. "It's time to keep our promise." "Past time," Danny agreed. They started planning something special. Something that would show Robert that his decades of sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Something that would prove that kindness really does come back around, even if it takes 22 years. The planning took months. They wanted everything to be perfect. Not just a simple gesture, but something that would change Robert's life completely and permanently. Something that would honor everything he'd done for them. "Do you think he'll be mad?" Danny asked one night as they finalized their plans. "You know how he is. He hates being the center of attention." Lily smiled. "He'll probably cry and tell us it's too much. But that's too bad. He deserves this. He deserves everything." They chose a date carefully. November 15th. Exactly 22 years since that rainy night when Robert first brought them food in the alley behind Tony's Italian kitchen. The night when an underpaid waiter with nothing to spare decided to share what little he had with 2 scared, hungry children. Neither Robert nor the rest of the world had any idea what was about to happen. But Lily and Danny knew. They'd spent more than a decade working toward this moment. Now finally it was time to show the world what happens when one person's kindness plants seeds in fertile soil. The harvest was about to come in. November 2024 arrived with the same crisp autumn air that had marked that fateful night 22 years earlier. Lily and Danny flew into Seattle quietly, not telling Robert they were coming. They'd both become busy, successful people with demanding schedules, so he wouldn't find it unusual if they couldn't visit for a while. But they weren't just visiting. They were orchestrating something big. First stop was Tony's Italian kitchen. The restaurant looked exactly the same as it had 2 decades ago. Same faded awning, same neon sign in the window, same smell of garlic and tomato sauce drifting out the door. Some things never change, and apparently this place was one of them. They walked in during a quiet afternoon, when Robert wouldn't be there. Mr. Tony himself was behind the bar, looking older but still recognizable. He glanced up when they entered and his eyes went wide. "Lily? Danny, is that really you?" "Hello, Mr. Tony," Lily said with a warm smile. "It's been a long time." The old man came around the bar and hugged them both. "Look at you two. All grown up. I heard you went off to fancy colleges and became successful. Robert talks about you all the time, you know. Can't shut him up about his kids. We want to talk to you about something," Danny said. "Something important. Can we sit?" Over coffee, they explained their plan. Mr. Tony listened with growing amazement as they told him about their company, their success, and what they wanted to do. When they finished, the old man had tears in his eyes. "That man," Mr. Tony said, shaking his head. "I almost fired him 22 years ago for feeding you kids. Did you know that? I thought he was crazy, throwing his life away for 2 children he didn't even know. Turns out he wasn't crazy at all. He was the smartest one of all of us. We want to buy the building," Lily said directly. "The restaurant, the property, everything. And we want to transfer ownership to Robert." Mr. Tony blinked in surprise. "Buy the building? You know I don't own it. I just lease it from the landlord. We know. We've already contacted the owner. He's willing to sell. We're asking what you think is fair for your business, your equipment, everything. We want this to be right for everyone." "You're serious about this?" "Completely serious. Mr. Tony sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. I've been thinking about retiring anyway. My wife keeps telling me I'm too old to be running a restaurant. But Robert, what will he do? This job is his whole life. That's exactly the point, Danny said. He's 63 years old and still working as a waiter because he gave everything he had to raise us. That ends now. We're going to make sure he never has to work another day unless he wants to. They worked out the details over the next week. The building purchase went through quickly with cash payment. They bought Mr. Tony's business at a fair price that would let him retire comfortably. They arranged for the other employees to keep their jobs with better wages. Everything was transferred into Robert's name through a trust, structured so that even if he tried to refuse it, legally it was already his. But that was just the beginning. Next, they went to Robert's landlord. The apartment building where Robert had lived for 25 years was a rundown place in an okay neighborhood. The landlord was a businessman who owned several properties and was always looking to sell if the price was right. "We want to buy the building," Lily told him. "What's your price?" The landlord named a figure. They didn't even negotiate. They paid it in cash within 3 days. Then they transferred ownership of Robert's specific apartment unit directly to him. Free and clear. No mortgage, no rent. His forever. But they didn't stop there. They hired contractors to renovate the entire apartment while Robert was at work. New kitchen. New bathroom. Fresh paint. New floors. Modern appliances. They couldn't make it bigger, but they could make it nice. Really nice. What about his car? Danny asked Lily one evening as they reviewed their plans. "What car? That old thing died months ago. He takes the bus now." Danny pulled up something on his laptop. "Exactly. Which is why we're getting him this." He turned the screen around. Lily's eyes went wide. "A Rolls-Royce? Are you serious? Why not? He's never had anything nice. Not one single luxury in his entire life. He deserves to drive something that makes him feel like the royalty he is." Lily thought about all those years of Robert's beat-up old sedan that barely ran. All those times he chose to fix it with duct tape and prayer rather than spend money on himself. All those months recently of him standing at bus stops in the rain because he couldn't afford another car. "You're right," she said. "Let's get him the nicest one they have." They ordered a brand new Rolls-Royce Phantom in midnight blue. Not a used one, not a cheaper model, the best. It cost more than most people's houses, but they didn't care. They'd spend 10 times that if it meant giving Robert something beautiful. But the most important part of their plan was financial security. They didn't want Robert to just have nice things. They wanted him to never worry about money again for the rest of his life. They set up a comprehensive financial portfolio in his name. Bonds, dividend-paying stocks, real estate investment trusts, all structured to generate steady, reliable income. Enough that Robert could live very comfortably without touching the principal. They also established a trust fund that would pay for any medical care he might need as he got older. Since he'd neglected his health for so many years, the total package they put together was worth several $1,000,000. It wasn't a fortune by their new standards, but it was more money than Robert had earned in his entire working life combined. "Do you think it's enough?" Danny asked, reviewing the numbers. "It'll never be enough," Lily replied. "There's no amount of money that equals what he did for us. But it's a start. It's a way of saying thank you. A way of showing him that his sacrifice mattered." They coordinated everything for November 15th, the anniversary of that first night. The renovated apartment would be ready. The restaurant transfer would be complete. The Rolls-Royce would be delivered. Everything timed perfectly. They even arranged for a professional driver to deliver the car and hand over the keys. They wanted the moment to be special, cinematic, something Robert would remember forever. The final touch was a letter. Lily spent hours writing it, trying to put into words what Robert meant to them. How he'd saved their lives in every way a person could be saved. How they'd never forget a single sacrifice he made. How everything they'd achieved was because he gave two scared, abandoned kids a chance. Danny read the letter and cried. "It's perfect. He's going to lose it when he reads this." "Good," Lily said, wiping her own eyes. "He should know. He should really know what he means to us." They flew back to Seattle on November 14th and checked into a hotel. Neither of them could sleep that night, too excited and nervous about the next day. They'd spent years building up to this moment, and now it was finally here. "What if he gets mad?" Danny said in the darkness of his hotel room, talking to Lily on the phone. What if he thinks it's too much? Then he can be mad, Lily said firmly. But we're doing this anyway. He spent his whole life taking care of us. Now it's our turn to take care of him, whether he likes it or not. The next morning, they positioned themselves near Tony's Italian kitchen, but out of sight. The Rolls-Royce was parked around the corner, the driver ready and waiting. Contractors had finished the apartment renovation the night before, leaving the keys with the building manager who'd been sworn to secrecy. Everything was in place. All they had to do now was wait for Robert's shift to end. Wait for the moment when their foster father, their hero, their savior, would walk out of that restaurant for what would be the last time he ever had to work a day in his life. 22 years ago, a waiter with nothing gave everything to two children who needed help. Today, those children, now successful adults, were about to return that gift in a way Robert never saw coming. The waiting was almost unbearable. But soon, very soon, Robert would learn what it felt like to be taken care of for once in his life. And Lily and Danny couldn't wait to see his face when it happened. Saturday morning, November 15th. Robert's body ached as he finished his shift at Tony's Italian kitchen. 63 years old, and he felt every single year in his bones. His back throbbed from hours of carrying heavy trays. His feet burned in his worn-out work shoes. His hands, scarred and weathered from decades of service, trembled slightly as he hung up his apron. Good work today. "Robert!" called out the young manager who'd taken over when Mr. Tony retired last month. Strange that. Mr. Tony had suddenly decided to retire and sold the place to some investment company. At least they'd kept all the staff on. Even gave everyone raises. Robert was grateful for that. "Thanks, Mike. See you Monday," Robert replied, grabbing his old jacket from the hook. He walked out the back door into the parking lot, the same lot where he'd found Lily and Danny all those years ago. Sometimes he still saw them there in his mind. Two scared kids huddled in the rain. Now they were successful adults with important careers. He was so proud of them it hurt. Robert headed toward the bus stop at the corner. His old car had finally died 8 months ago, and he couldn't afford another one. The bus wasn't so bad. Gave him time to rest his feet on the ride home. He was about halfway across the parking lot when he heard the sound. A car engine, but not just any car engine. This was different. Smooth, powerful, expensive sounding. He turned around and stopped dead in his tracks. A Rolls-Royce, gleaming midnight blue in the morning sun, was pulling into the parking lot. Not just any Rolls-Royce. A Phantom. Robert had seen them in movies, but never in real life. The thing must have cost more money than he'd earned in 5 lifetimes. The car pulled up right next to him and stopped. Robert looked around, confused. Was someone lost? Did they need directions? A driver in a professional suit stepped out. "Mr. Chen?" the man asked, looking directly at Robert. Robert glanced behind him, thinking maybe there was another person. But no, it was just him. Yes? That's me. Can I help you?" The driver smiled warmly. "Actually, sir, I'm here to help you." Before Robert could respond, he heard voices behind him. Familiar voices. He spun around and felt his heart nearly stop. Lily and Danny were walking toward him from the restaurant entrance, both dressed in nice clothes, both with tears already streaming down their faces. What were they doing here? They were supposed to be busy with work across the country. Lily? Danny, what's going on? Is everything okay? Robert's mind raced with worry. Had something bad happened? Lily reached him first and threw her arms around him. "Everything's perfect," she whispered. "Everything's finally perfect." Danny joined the hug, wrapping his arms around both of them. Robert stood there in the parking lot, completely bewildered, hugging his kids while a Rolls-Royce sat nearby and a professional driver waited patiently. Finally, they pulled back. Robert looked at them with concern. "You two are scaring me. What's happening? Why are you here? Do you know what day it is?" Lily asked, wiping her eyes. Robert thought about it. "Saturday, November 15th? 22 years ago today," Danny said, his voice thick with emotion. 22 years ago, you brought us food in the rain. You saved our lives, and you've been sacrificing everything for us ever since." "That's what parents do," Robert said automatically. "You take care of your kids." "But you never stopped," Lily said. "Even after we grew up. Even after we left for college. You're still working yourself to exhaustion. You're still putting yourself last. You're still living in that tiny apartment and taking the bus because you spent everything you had on us." "I'm fine. Really. I don't need much." "Stop," Danny interrupted gently. Just stop, Robert. For once in your life, let someone take care of you. The driver stepped forward and held out a set of keys, beautiful keys, attached to a leather key fob with the Rolls-Royce logo. These are for you, Mr. Chen. Robert stared at the keys like they were made of poison. What? No, I can't. That car must cost a fortune. This is too much. It's not enough, Lily said firmly. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. None of it is enough. But it's a start. She handed him the folder. Robert's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were documents, legal documents, property deeds, bank statements. His eyes scanned the pages trying to make sense of what he was seeing. This says I own the restaurant, and my apartment, and what is this account? These numbers can't be right. They're right, Danny said. It's all yours. The restaurant is yours, free and clear. You can run it yourself, hire someone else to run it, sell it, whatever you want. Your apartment is renovated and paid off. You'll never pay rent again. And that account? That's your retirement fund. It's invested to provide income for the rest of your life. Robert's legs felt weak. He staggered slightly and both Lily and Danny caught him, helping him lean against the Rolls-Royce. I don't understand. This is millions of dollars. How did you? Our company, Lily explained. Synergy Tech. We told you we started a business, but we didn't tell you how successful it became. We're worth hundreds of millions of dollars now, Robert, and none of it would exist without you. You gave us everything when you had nothing, Danny added. You worked 2 jobs. You barely slept. You ate plain rice so we could have real meals. You never bought yourself anything nice. Not once in 22 years. You sacrificed your entire life for us. Robert shook his head, tears now streaming down his face. That's not true. You two gave me purpose. Before you came along, I was just drifting through life. You made everything meaningful. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. And you're the best thing that ever happened to us, Lily said, crying openly now. You taught us what love really means. You showed us that family isn't about blood. It's about showing up. It's about sacrifice and commitment and never giving up on people, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. The driver cleared his throat gently. Mr. Chen, if I may, there's something else in the car for you. Robert looked into the Rolls-Royce's interior for the first time. On the passenger seat was an envelope. Lily reached in and got it, handing it to him. Read it, she said softly. Robert's hands trembled so badly he could barely open the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in Lily's careful script. He had to wipe his eyes several times to read it clearly. Dear Robert, 22 years ago you saw 2 scared, hungry kids and decided to help them. You had every reason not to. You were struggling yourself. You had your own problems, your own life to worry about. But you helped us anyway because you have a heart bigger than anyone I've ever known. You didn't just feed us that night. You kept feeding us. You took us in when you barely had room for yourself. You worked yourself to the bone to give us a chance at a normal life. You came to every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every moment that mattered, even when you were exhausted beyond measure. You never complained. Not once. You never made us feel like we were burdens. You never treated us like we were charity cases or foster kids or anything other than your own children. You loved us completely, without conditions, without expectations of anything in return. Because of you, I graduated from Stanford. Because of you, Danny graduated from MIT. Because of you, we learned what hard work and dedication really mean. Because of you, we understood that success isn't just about making money. It's about making a difference in people's lives. Everything we are, everything we've accomplished, everything we've built, it all flows from the kindness you showed 2 orphaned kids on a rainy night 22 years ago. You planted seeds of love and compassion, and now we're harvesting the results. This car, this money, this security, it's not payment. We could never pay you back for what you've done. It's simply our way of saying we see you. We remember. Your sacrifice mattered, and now it's your turn to rest. You gave us your whole life. Let us give you the rest of yours. Free from worry, free from struggle, free from having to work your fingers to the bone just to survive. You always told us that kindness doesn't keep score. You're right. But love remembers, and we remember everything. Thank you for saving our lives. Thank you for being our dad. Thank you for showing us what it means to be truly good in a world that often isn't. We love you more than words can say. Forever grateful, Lily and Danny. By the time Robert finished reading, he couldn't see through his tears. The letter slipped from his hands and Danny caught it. Robert covered his face and sobbed, his whole body shaking with emotion. 22 years of holding everything together, of being strong, of never breaking down, all came pouring out in that parking lot. Lily and Danny held him up, supporting him just like he'd supported them through everything. They stood there together, three people who weren't related by blood but were family in every way that truly mattered. Finally, Robert lifted his head. His face was red and wet with tears, but there was something else in his expression too. Wonder, disbelief, overwhelming gratitude. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "Yes, you do," Lily said firmly. "You deserve this and so much more. But I'm just a waiter. I didn't do anything special. I just did what anyone would do." "That's where you're wrong," Danny said. "Most people wouldn't do what you did. Most people would have walked past us that night. Most people wouldn't have taken in two random kids and raised them for 15 years.